Hello, welcome to another video with me. My name is Melissa, and if you are new here, welcome. And if you are not new here, welcome back. I know it's been a while since I've made a video, but I'll get to that in just a second. In today's video, we are going to be talking about if you are one of the spring color seasons, meaning you are a clear spring, a true spring, or a light spring. We're going to be talking about if you are one of those, how to achieve a dark aesthetic as a spring color season. Now, to catch you up on where I've been, it's just been a weird back-to-back couple of weeks. One week I had a really bad fever, and then the week right after I got a head injury. I'm all good now, but you know, I did have to take some time away to heal from that. I couldn't really look at computer screens for a little bit. I got super swamped with work. I do work an 8-hour job 5 days a week, for those of you who don't know, so that does take up a lot of my time, and unfortunately I can't, spend as much time making content like this, but I am here. For those of you who don't know, I offer style guide services. That includes Kibbe body type, your face essence, as well as astrology style readings. Those slots are currently closed though at the moment because I want to take the time to finish the outstanding orders I do have. And for those of you who are still waiting on a style guide, I appreciate your patience more than anything. Just know that a lot of love is going into those and I am still working on them, but just know that I try to make it super personal to you based off of the sketches I'm doing as well as the images I'm choosing for your mood imagery. But know that I am super grateful, and after I finish everyone's orders, I have a surprise for those of you who have been waiting. Okay, back to the color season. So just a heads up, this is not gonna be a video of how to find your color season. I think that is a personal journey, and there are so many amazing resources to look out for on how to find your color season. I will briefly touch upon it, but I won't go too deep into it. So there are 3 things to determine before you find out what your color season is. So 1, what is your undertone? Are you more cool toned or are you more warm toned? Or if you are like me, you are neutral toned. Therefore, if you are, just my personal opinion, if you are neutral toned, your temperature or your undertone is not going to be your prominent trait when finding out your color season, which is going to be helpful, which I'll explain here in just a second. The next thing you need to know is your value or depth. Are you more light or dark? Are your features more on the lighter side or the darker side? So for example, if you were to use me as an example, I have darker features. My natural hair is just dark. I have dark eyes, and another dead giveaway is that darker colors tend to just look natural on me, and lighter and more muted soft pastels look kind of off on me. And then next is your chroma or clarity. Are you more muted and soft, or are you more bright and clear and super saturated? And you can also determine that as well as how colors look on you. So an example for me is I am on the more saturated side, and I am a dark winter because my features are prominently dark. Also, cooler colors tend to look best on me, and through trial and error, that's how I determined I'm a dark winter. But for the springs, we're gonna be focusing on springs today. If your features are bright and warm toned, you're a bright spring. If your features are prominently warm and bright, you are a true spring. And if your features are prominently light, and then you notice that you're warm, then you are a light spring. The important thing to note is what are the more dominant traits about you. So like I mentioned, it was not obvious that my undertones were not that obvious. That's why my undertone was more of a secondary thing to notice, whereas my features being dark was more of a dead giveaway. So the way I'm going to format this is I'm going to be talking about a style or aesthetic that I think could work perfectly with you as a spring, and then I will give a celebrity example. Now, just a reminder, as we know, there are so many disappointing celebrities right now. I know I have been personally I shouldn't be that surprised, but it just makes it hard and dissuades me from wanting to talk about certain people. But when it comes to the color seasons, I did think about how could I format this video without talking about celebrities, and there are ways to go about it, but I think just naming even just a few, just so you get an idea of who falls under these color seasons can be very helpful. But just a reminder, these celebrities are not people to aspire for. They are examples. They are just examples. I was doing research for the perfect dark, alternative, edgy, spooky aesthetics that can work for the springs. Runway looks in the 90s actually work perfectly in your favor. When it comes to the 90s runway, it was an interesting mix of taking inspiration from the 1950s, 60s, as well as taking inspiration from what was going on in grunge music and what grunge musicians were wearing. So there was a bit of imperfection. There were ripped up details. There were so many plaids from the flannels that they were seeing, but then they were mixing it in with what fashion houses do. Now, I'm not going to name every single designer I'm showing here, so I do have these images on my Pinterest under Dark Aesthetic Springs if you want to figure out which designer is per this. But one designer I know for sure was doing this was Betsy Johnson. Betsy Johnson always took inspiration from what was going on in the punk scene, grunge scene, as well as just her own personal preference of having a colorful aesthetic. And a lot of the colors that we saw in her runway shows actually work perfectly with a lot of spring. Like I was saying, 90s did take inspiration from the 1950s silhouette-wise, meaning they took a lot of inspiration from the bodices, the way the shape of the dresses, the pencil skirts. And we see this a lot in movies like Jawbreaker. And someone said this on TikTok, I don't remember her name, but I will put her here, but she did say the most accurate quote, that the vintage to goth or alternative dark aesthetic pipeline is one and the same. You take a lot of those vintage clothing and you turn it black, it kind of looks like what we are already into, and vice versa. So if you think about it, that is one way for a spring to take inspiration from a dark or alternative aesthetic, is looking to vintage inspirations. And I'm just using 90s runway as an example because they already mixed it for us. They mixed the 50s, 60s, and grunge elements, and they added it in with their own flair. And a celebrity example of someone who did this was actually Rose McGowan, and she is actually widely known as an alternative muse, especially from the 90s. Some of these images are going to be with her ex. I'm not going to name him because he doesn't deserve that much. How he got these beautiful women I will always be in disbelief of that. So just ignore him and please focus on her outfits. So Rose McGowan is an example of a bright or clear spring. She is actually a great example of someone who dresses disharmoniously with her spring color palette as well as harmoniously with her color palette. So let's first start out with how she dresses in her color palette. And like I mentioned, Jawbreaker. That is one of the most iconic fashion movies that a lot of us who are into styles and aesthetics, we love referencing Jawbreaker. It is a silly movie, it is a little campy, but we cannot deny that there are some great outfit inspirations in there. And that is a great example of how 90s does 1950s. If you look at Rose McGowan, she is actually in a lot of times in her color season. And when it comes to bright and clear springs, they look so good in these saturated colors. So if you were to dress in a dark aesthetic, look into hues that are rich in color. And even when she wears black, which is technically disharmonious with her color season, it doesn't always look bad, especially when she also mixes it in with other colors that are within her color season as well. And I think that is actually one of her techniques, is she mixes things that are unconventionally shouldn't work together, but they do work. And another thing that you have to keep in mind is if you are to dress disharmoniously with your color season, you gotta own it. If you think about it, this world is full of people that are going to criticize you. I have had so many people hate on my bangs. I have had so many comments saying, you should just get curtain bangs, even though I'm like, I did not ask you. No one asked you. This was not an argument. And that's kind of the attitude you're gonna have to bring to wearing things outside of your color season. And just sometimes owning up to it. It is amazing what that can do, and Rose McGowan is kind of an example of that. Some people have argued that she actually may be a spring because of how well she looks in some of these vampiric looks. And the thing is, if you think about specifically bright and clear springs, they are actually neighbors with the winter color palettes. And what I actually don't hear a lot about is, yes, they look great if they dress within their color season. There are times where they can actually borrow colors from their neighboring seasons and it doesn't look all that off. And I think bright and clear springs, because they look so good in super saturated hues, in some cases black, vampiric, bloody type of colors actually can work. And I think that is, Rose McGowan is an example of that. The next aesthetic that I think just naturally works with springs and does teeter-totter between the dark and spooky aesthetic is Whimsigoth. When it comes to Whimsigoth, we do think of actually bright and saturated colors, and it is argued, is it a dark aesthetic? And yeah, I do think it is. Whimsigoth takes so much inspiration from the occult, all things that are of witchcraft, and we cannot deny that. Of the obvious dark aesthetics, like you can take inspiration from bats and spiders and spider webs, and I know some of these things people consider a cliche, but I think like owning them, taking pride in these motifs, there's nothing wrong with it. I don't care how cliche the bat aesthetic will look. If it's something that you like, and if you like dark aesthetics, and especially if you like these motifs, own up to it. Just wear it, just do it. And I think that's an attitude. If you like dark aesthetics, spooky things, alternative things, you're just gonna have to bring the attitude of, this is what I want to wear. You can find so many rich velvet colored robes and blouses, celestial motifs on tops. Overall, go for a look that makes you look like a forest witch from the 90s. And that brings me to my next spring muse, which is Nicole Kidman, specifically from her role in Practical Magic, which is one of the blueprints for Whimsigoth. As we can see how she dresses in the movie, it is not the most obvious dark aesthetic. However, we can still take inspiration from that, such as her green velvet dress, her maxi skirts. And in some cases, she does actually wear black. Even though that does go against her color season, it works because she is wearing a colorful skirt with it. Or sometimes just wearing the wrong color season, but in the right silhouette that is flattering to you personally can work in so many ways. And then one of the like cheat codes of how to dress dark in your color season is find the colors that work in your season. So your spring, look for these warm, beautiful tones and find the darkest that you can find of it. So it's like the dark magentas, the dark olive greens, the burgundies, and even super rich reds that are often associated with like vampiric Victorian motifs. Wear that as like a red lip gloss or a red lipstick. Like that, wearing these bold elements can actually really make a statement. Speaking of red and Nicole Kidman, let's talk about Moulin Rouge really quick. I know that's not the most obvious one, and take that with a grain of salt in terms of how flattering or unflattering things look on Nicole Kidman, because Moulin Rouge is a Baz Luhrmann movie, and we know those movies tend to play around a lot with the lighting and color, and it's very fantasy-like. However, we cannot deny that there are a lot of rich and warm-toned reds that I think would work perfectly on a true spring. And that brings me to my next aesthetic, which is another aesthetic that I think just works naturally with the springs, and even more so if you are a light spring, is dark academia. Yes, there's light academia, but let's focus on dark academia because this is a dark aesthetic video. Now, I'm going to start this with dark academia, but know that this is more so taking inspiration from vintage looks of the Victorian persuasion. And when it comes to dark academia looks in general, you don't have to be very specific or strict on the timeline, but overall, you just want to give off the vibe of another era. And when it comes to dark academia, there is just this evident look of you are going for a somewhat dark aesthetic, but of course with academic elements. So of course you're gonna have plaids, herringbones. If you are of any of the springs, know that I am jealous of you because I have actually tried going for a dark academia look, but a lot of these rich browns and burnt oranges, they kind of muddied my skin out. So if you are one of the springs of any kind, just know that a dark academia look can actually really work in your favor, and it can look so natural and still of a dark aesthetic. And you can add spooky elements to that even if it's in obvious ways. When it comes to a dark academia look, there is a lot of lapels, so like a lot of trench coats, a lot of blazers, and button-ups, and this gives you room to accessorize with things that nod to your spookier side if that's what you're going for, whether it's like skull pins, collar chains. If you can pull off a pocket watch, please get a pocket watch. And the problem I've noticed though with dark academia is that it is often up top, like it's autumn based, it's often associated with fall, and it's a lot easier to dress for a dark academia look if you are of like a fall season. But don't forget that it does work with springs. I see so many dark academia imagery that I see on blondes or those with light brown hair, and it works because dark academia is one of those dark aesthetic looks that is of the warm undertones, and there are so many great inspirations that you can take from it. I know one of like the most iconic dark academia movies that is so often referenced is The Dead Poets Society. I think the more feminine version of that's my personal favorite, is the Mona Lisa smile. But if you want true dark academia outfit inspiration, I do love Kill Your Darlings. I know that's our Harry Potter, but I think he did amazing in that movie, and there's so many print and color and silhouette inspiration that you can take from that. You can even make it a little more feminine, where instead of some of like the button-ups and the vests they're wearing, add like a skirt or more of a dress to it. But even what they wear as in menswear, I think looks great on all genders. And another movie, of course, that not enough people talk about it is the Mummy series, especially of that time period and what Rachel Weisz wears. I know she's not spring, I think, or maybe she is. But either way, that's a great dark academia outfit inspiration movie as well. Mia, I don't want to mispronounce her last name, but she is from Crimson Peak, and we are going to specifically focus on the look and feel that she gave off in Crimson Peak. So she is a light spring, so we see that where she has actually a low, muted, saturated look. Her hair and skin tone like really match up, so her chroma is not going to be saturated, bright, or clear. She is definitely soft and light, so she is a light spring through and through. Even so, she still gives off this haunting performance. She is through and through a dark aesthetic, and I think this movie in itself and the looks that she gives off can also be translated into a more casual dark academia look. Now, there are some costumes that she wears that are a bit more costumey, and if you were to wear it, you may get some questions, but there are ways to make it a little more casual, which I often get asked because I often give these outlandish examples and people are like, how do I go to work in this Victorian poofy sleeve dress? So you take elements of that. You're not going to take the whole thing as a whole. So you're going to take some of these corset details, or you can even find puff sleeves that aren't as poofy, or you can take some of the ruffle details, the ribbon details. The way she wears her hair, whether it's in an updo, I think, but it does look like it was inspired by the Gibson Girl. And even when her hair is down, it was giving off very much Victorian doll. And I did mention that this is kind of a dark ingenue look. Okay, so now let's give a few examples of how sometimes to achieve a dark aesthetic, you just don't have to go within your color season, and sometimes just going for all of this black, wearing the black eyeshadow, wearing these loud, obvious types of accessories that technically go outside of what works for you can create this dark aesthetic that you actually want. You want this alternative look. And one of my favorite examples though is Debbie Harry. If you think about it, I think she is a spring through and through. She is warm tone, she is blonde, and she just gives off her no care attitude. I think she's the blueprint for the aesthetic of the rock star girlfriend, but you are, instead of the girlfriend of the rock star, you yourself are the rock star. So it's not You get what I'm saying. And she truly does dress outside of her color season. She wears super heavy black eyeshadow, heavy eyeliner that is so disharmonious with a typical spring, but she works it because she owns up to it and she has made it her signature style. Dressing outside of your color season can become your signature style. And another example that so many people have actually mentioned in my comments is Taylor Momsen. And I'm not gonna lie, I don't wanna lie to you guys, but I don't have anything against Taylor Momsen, but I think she just was never a personal muse for me. But I get it now. I think if you are someone who is blonde and you like that dark, heavy aesthetic, the alternative look, Taylor Momsen is an example that we don't see often, because most often when you see dark aesthetics, you see dark hair, dark clothes, all black clothes. And you see Taylor Momsen, who is dressing outside of her color season, and she really owns up to it. Sometimes you really do just have to dress outside your color season and own up to it. And sometimes just having that overall confidence actually can really be like an accessory for you and really work in your favor. And that brings me to my last minute tips. So one of the ways that I go about my dark aesthetic is I get anything in black. If I like it, I get it in black. If I like that pant, I get it in black. But I think when it comes to a spring, do the opposite. Find things that are typically spooky and find it in a color. So like my friend Backstitch Bruja, she has an amazing brand if you haven't heard of her, but she has like these coffin bags, has all sorts of purses, and they come in all sorts of vibrant colors that could actually work in your favor, like this super bright warm toned red coffin bag or this heart-shaped Harley Quinn backpack. My next tip is remember, as a spring, your undertone is going to be on the warmer side. So think about all of the dark aesthetic jewelry that is in gold. Necklaces that take inspiration from rosaries, get it in gold. Regal Rose has a plethora of jewelry that takes inspiration from Gothic architecture and Gothic cathedrals, get it in gold. There are so many skull. I know it's like on the nose, but sometimes you just gotta do it, and there's nothing wrong with being on the nose or being cliche. I don't care, and you shouldn't either. Get necklaces, earrings that have spikes, skulls, bats, spider webs. Get it in gold. And another thing too is rose gold. I know rose gold is not really trending right now, but know that rose gold also looks amazing on a lot of springs. And then my last tip, kind of like what I was saying with my Rose McGowan example, is if you are dressing in colors that are harmonious with your color season, but you want to have a bit of that edge, a bit of that spice to nod to your dark aesthetic, is wearing cooler tones in the makeup. So if you have the warm toned here, try a darker lipstick. And I know that may be a little jarring, but just try it out. It may be the thing that you were looking for. And when it comes to being a spring, what I am very envious of, especially as a dark winter, is how easy it is for you all to have that dark aesthetic in an obvious way. For me, if I wear black, sometimes it just looks like an everyday, regular outfit. Whereas for springs, if you wear black or a dark plum lipstick and it does have that jarring look, it looks good. Like, that's what some of us want. And if you are into dark and alternative aesthetics, own it. You look great in it. So sometimes a spring, whether you're true, light, or bright, when you wear these dark plums or dark brown lipstick or dark reds, just know that it may not look as jarring as you think, and it's actually just amplifying the aesthetic that you are going for. If you watched this whole thing, I appreciate you. I hope you have a great week, and until next time, bye.